0612 UTC. The first satellite drifted over the Bighorn Basin. Its cameras saw what they always saw, a flat, dull plain of sagebrush and dust. No trees, no towns, just a faded scar of old riverbeds and dry air. The AI tagged the feed. Status, stable, no alerts, no change. 12 minutes later, the second satellite crossed the same track. This time, the image halted the system. Where the plane had been, a jagged wall now cut across the basin, a fresh mountain spine, dark and sharp, nearly 60 kilometers long. It rose straight out of the open ground, pointing like an arrow to the northeast. No quake logs, no shock waves in the air, no sound picked up by the infrasound network. Global systems blinked, checked, and checked again. At 0631 UTC, Megan Lawson was pulled from her model run in Casper and routed into an emergency feed. On the wall, the two satellite shots flickered side by side. Timestamps glowed in red, 0612 and 0624. Before and after, flat prairie, then a jagged range. The system AI spoke first. Image integrity, 99.999%. Megan zoomed in. The mountain's edge cast a long, fresh shadow. Its sides were too straight, too clean, as if drawn with a ruler and knifed upward. Magnetometer data scrolled in the corner. Readings from low-orbit craft were spiking around the new structure, forming tight, unnatural rings. Glitch, someone muttered off-screen. The AI cut in. No imaging faults detected. Cross-check with ground sensors complete. Terrain change confirmed. Megan's throat felt dry. The Bighorn Basin was one of the most stable regions on Earth. Her own model said so. A new notice flashed across the board. Automated no-fly zone installed. Coordinate grid. Bighorn Basin Sector 713. Drones launched from nearby research sites pinged back denial codes. Civil airways shifted around an invisible wall. As Megan leaned closer to the impossible map, a new window opened in the corner of her screen. A tall, dark-haired man in a controlled room came into focus. His badge read, Price. Dr. Lawson, he said. Agent Daniel Price. Anomalous Terrain Task Force. This site is now a federal restricted zone. He tapped something off-screen. Another feed loaded. A grainy ground-penetrating scan of the new range appeared, banded in gray and white. Megan frowned. Inside what should have been solid rock was straight, perfectly aligned voids. Long lines and right angles, repeating bright bands that marked metal. Those are corridors, she said, before she could stop herself. Beams. Price watched her face. First scans show alloy frameworks and regular internal geometry. This mountain was not pushed up from below. He let the words hang in the air. It was built, he said, and it was not here 12 minutes before it appeared. Megan stared at the range that had risen in silence, in full view of every sensor on Earth, and felt her life's work tilt. Her models had never allowed for this. The Casper Response Center had no windows. It was a low, featureless building at the edge of town, armored against storms and shielded from outside signals. Inside, the air smelled faintly of metal and recycled air. Rows of analysts sat at consoles, eyes fixed on glowing data. Megan stood at the central table with Agent Price. The main wall showed a loop of time-lapse images from the Bighorn Basin. 21 UTC, the night before. The basin, black and flat under stars. 03, the same. 0559, a gray dawn over empty land. 0612, the first satellite pass. Bare, dusty ground. 0624, the second pass. The new mountain range cutting across the basin like a blade. Back it up, Megan said. The tech on duty scrubbed the timeline. Megan watched the ground, zoomed in until individual shrubs and dry channels filled the screen. There was no sign, no bulge, no swelling, no heat bloom. Then, between frames, the plain vanished. Peaks and ridges took its place. It breaks every law of crustal mechanics, she said quietly. Price folded his arms. Our external message will be a rapid uplift event caused by unknown forces, pending investigation. Megan shook her head. You cannot lift 60 kilometers of crust in 12 minutes without a quake signature, without fractures. There is nothing in any model like this. Not plate tectonics, not magma flow, not anything. "We're not sending out your models," Price said. His brown eyes were tired but sharp. "We're sending out what will keep people calm." Another feed opened, a view from a stratospheric drone far outside the new no-fly zone. The camera zoomed to maximum. The range rose in pale morning light, its near side forming a sheer cliff. "There," Megan said, pointing. At the base of the mountain, the grassland and scrub looked untouched. No bulldozed soil, no rockfall. The range rose from the plain, the way a wall rose from the floor of a room. "Where's the uplift zone?" she asked. "Where's the buckle? The compression ridges?" The imagery team overlaid her old topographic map. The basin's gentle slopes and dry channels lined up perfectly with the new footage, right up to the cliff base. It was as if the mountains had been dropped onto the surface without disturbing it. "Subsurface seismographs?" Megan asked. A woman 2 rows back answered. "All stations green. No P waves, no S waves. Baseline noise only. Ground tilt sensors." Megan pushed. "Flat," the woman said. "Within normal micro variation. Nothing to show uplift." Megan stared at the data. The Earth had not flexed. It had not cracked. It had, according to every tool, stayed still. And yet, Price said, tapping the air, "There is a mountain." He gestured to another display. Ground-penetrating scans from orbital platforms showed cross-sections of the range. Inside, pale bands of stone wrapped around darker, precise lines. "Zoom here," Megan said. The scan centered on a segment near the southern end of the range. Inside the rock face, emptiness formed straight shafts running parallel to the ridge. Crossbeams spanned them at perfect intervals. "This is not natural jointing," Megan said. "These are structural." Price watched her, weighing her reaction. "Say it plainly, Dr. Lawson." "These are halls," she said, "or conduits. A frame inside a shell." "Material analysis," a tech called out. "Spectral read indicates synthetic silicates with uniform grain, not standard sedimentary layering. Metal content in internal bands is anomalously pure. Mixed unknown alloys." "Unknown how?" Price asked. "The ratios don't match standard industrial use," the tech replied. "We have traces of metals rare in the crust, in patterns that look planned." Megan studied the layout. The inner lines formed repeating grids, like the ribs of a gigantic ship buried in stone. Her stomach tightened. "Send me the raw data," she said. "I want to run it against deep crustal models." Price nodded, then turned to her. "You'll get everything. But first, we go there." He brought up a map of Wyoming. A red rectangle blinked over the new range. Around it, a wide ring marked the restricted zone. No flights, no ground traffic, no unauthorized signals. "I thought you said it was locked down," Megan said. "It is," Price replied, "which is why you and I will have the only civilian research clearance on site. Your expertise is relevant." She almost laughed. "My expertise is in slow things, plate drift, uplift measured in millimeters per year, not pop-up mountains and invisible building crews." Price's mouth tensed at the corner. Slow things still matter. If something changed the crust without moving it, the way we understand, we need the best eyes on how it should have behaved. He stepped closer, voice lower. "And you have modeled the Bighorn Basin more than anyone else alive." He was right. Megan had grown up outside Casper, watching distant ranges in every season. She had turned that childhood obsession into a career, mapping how mountains rose and crumbled over millions of years. She knew the basin's deep faults, even the dead ones, like old friends. "This doesn't fit," she said, "at all." "That is why you are going," Price said. "Be ready to move in 20 minutes." The flight to the restricted zone was short and silent. The aircraft lifted straight up from a shielded pad behind the response center, then surged north on a locked course. Megan sat buckled in beside Price. The cabin had no windows. A single screen on the wall showed a live map with their position as a small white dot racing toward the red rectangle. "Who else is on site?" she asked. "Army containment units, an ATF core team, remote survey crews," Price said. "You're the lead geologic analyst." She frowned. "What about topsoil disturbance? Animal reaction? Any ground-level witness reports?" "None," Price said. "Local ranches saw nothing. Monitoring drones saw nothing. Biotrack sensors show no mass animal flight. It was as if nothing happened, except that suddenly the terrain was different. "That's not possible," Megan said. Price gave a thin smile. "Here we are." The aircraft began to drop. Megan felt the shift in her stomach. The screen zoomed in. Their dot crossed into the red zone. "Last feed before landing," Price said. He flicked his fingers, and the screen changed to a live camera hung on the aircraft's belly. At first, Megan saw only familiar Wyoming ground sagebrush, dry washes, sun-bleached stones. Then the frame slid forward, and the world changed. The mountains hit her like a physical force. A straight, high wall of dark stone cut across the land, climbing into the sky in jagged peaks. The face was almost sheer, like a broken tooth. Shadows filled vertical gullies. In some places, the wall rose so sharply that snow clung to its upper ledges, even in early summer warmth. At its base, the prairie ended in a clean line. There were no foothills, no fans of broken rock, no sign that the earth had buckled or folded. Grass and scrub led right up to the cliff, then stopped as if erased. "It's like it was printed," Megan said, barely above a whisper. "Landing," the aircraft system said. The craft set down on a temporary pad a few kilometers from the wall. When the doors slid open, hot, dry air rushed in, carrying dust and the faint smell of sun-baked plants. Megan stepped out and felt the ground under her boots, hard, packed soil she knew from a lifetime in this state. Ahead, the new range loomed. Up close, it was even stranger. The rock was a dark gray, almost metallic in places. Flat plains cut across it at angles that looked too clean for natural fracture. The vertical faces had striations that lined up in perfect bands, as if poured in layers. Soldiers had set up perimeter markers and sensor towers along a wide arc. A portable lab cluster sat near the pad, cables running into the earth. Megan walked toward the cliff until Price put a hand out. "Stay inside the cleared corridor," he said, pointing to a series of flags. "We've only scanned this path for field anomalies so far." She followed the line, every sense alert. The guards watched them with tense faces. Drones buzzed just beyond the no-fly ceiling, held at a fixed distance by a digital leash. When she reached the base of the wall, she stopped. The rock rose straight up from the prairie like the side of some buried machine. There was no transition zone. Where the soil ended, the stone began, in a sharp, unwavering line. She crouched and ran gloved fingers along the contact. No crushed sediment, no tilted layers. The bedrock under the prairie did not bend toward the mountain. It simply met it, cleanly. "This is not fault contact," Megan said. "This is not intrusive igneous rock pushing in. It's an interface." She looked up. The wall soared hundreds of meters overhead. Far above, she could see lighter lines like horizontal ribs. "Scan layer 13, she called to a nearby tech. He tapped his device. A holographic slab appeared in front of them, a slice through the mountain at the point where they stood. Inside, the bands of synthetic stone wrapped around a clear rectilinear grid. Shafts ran parallel to the range's length. Cross corridors cut them. At intersections, nodes glowed brighter, hinting at thicker material or denser alloys. "Nature does not do this," Megan said. Price stepped beside her. "You're sure?" She looked at him. "I've spent my life learning what nature does. This is different. The rock is a shell. Inside is a structure." He nodded slowly. "Then call it what it is." She hesitated. Saying it out loud would make it real. "This isn't a mountain," she said finally. "It's a megastructure buried in fake stone." As the words left her mouth, the air seemed to grow heavier. The soldiers shifted their weight. The hum of portable generators sounded too loud. Price turned to his wrist console. "Control, mark this. Initial on-site geologic assessment by Dr. Lawson. Classification, artificial, large-scale, internal framework present." He glanced back at the towering wall, then at Megan. "Welcome to the impossible range," he said. By midday, the temporary lab felt like a pressure cooker. Screens, sample racks, and portable analyzers filled the room. Outside, the dark wall of the new range cast a long shadow over the camp. Inside, Megan stood at a central station, staring at internal scan data. The metal grids inside the mountain formed repeating patterns, complex, but not random. Ratios between beam lengths kept recurring, angles repeated with strange precision. A new voice cut through the noise behind her. Triadic 90-degree offset, just like Tbilisi and Samarkand. Megan turned. An older man in a light field jacket stood in the doorway, white hair wind-tossed, eyes bright behind thin glasses. His ID, projected faintly in the air near his shoulder, read, Prof. F. Harold Vincent, Ancient Engineering History. Professor Vincent, Price said, stepping forward. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Harold waved a hand. You do not drag an old man across continents unless it is important, Agent Price. I am glad it was worth the ride. His gaze went back to the scan projection, hungry and focused. Megan introduced herself. Megan Lawson. Tectonic imaging. Ah, Harold said. The mountain doctor. He tapped his temple. I have read your work on the Bighorn Basin. Very precise. Megan blinked. You've read my work? Of course, he said. Anyone who wants to hide things inside the crust should know who is watching the crust. He stepped closer to the hovering scan. May I? Megan nodded and handed him control. He zoomed in on a node where multiple beams joined. 37:61 ratio on the longs, he murmured. And the cross braces. Yes, 13:21. Fibonacci pairs. He shot Megan a quick look. Do you see it? She frowned and measured with the cursor. He was right. The beam lengths followed repeating number pairs used in several ancient designs. I know those numbers from old temple plans, she said. Old is one word for them, Harold replied. Tartarian is another. At the word, several people in the lab shifted or looked up. Tartaria had been a fringe topic years ago, tied to internet rumors and dismissed theories. By 2087, that had changed. 50 years of careful digs under parts of Eurasia had uncovered buried foundations and strange metal frames. They did not match known cultures. They were older, too old. Scan overlay, please, Harold said. He swiped, and images appeared beside the mountain cross-section. Broken metal skeletons, dug from deep under Central Asia and Eastern Europe. They formed parts of towers, domes, and long horizontal frames. Even in ruins, they had a look. Simple lines, repeated in complex grids, using the same odd ratios. Harold lined up a damaged frame from a site near Old Moscow, with the node inside the Wyoming mountain. The match was clear. The joint geometry is identical, Harold said, even these reinforcement flanges. See? No modern engineer would bother with this style, but the Tartarian sites use it everywhere. Megan studied the overlay. The mountain's internal beams looked like a complete, unbroken version of the ruins. You're saying this range has the same internal framework as those ancient structures? She asked. Harold smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. I am saying it appears to be built by the same hand, or at least from the same design language, down to specific ratios and load paths. Impossible, Megan said. Those sites are at least, 100,000 years old? The deep cores from Samarkand suggest older, Harold said softly. Much older. The dates make people nervous, so the official reports use wide ranges. But the physical evidence is clear. These builders thought in spans that make our history feel like a weekend. Price stepped in. Professor, we brought you because our initial analysis flagged Tartarian-like features. You are telling me this is stronger than like... Harold rotated the mountain scan, aligning different sections with his old images. Every time, the same grid logic emerged. The joint spacing here, he said, tapping. The curve of this load path. Even the way they blend metal into the surrounding medium. It is not a copy. It is a continuation. Megan felt a chill. A continuation of what? Harold looked up at the towering wall through the lab window, of a building project that never really ended. The first core sample arrived just after 14. A drill rig had been set up against the base of the mountain, anchored to a frame pressed tight against the strange stone. It had bored a narrow 30-meter shaft straight into the wall and pulled out a long cylinder of material. The core lay on a padded table, a clean column of gray, white, and metallic bands. Megan pulled on gloves and leaned in. The outer layers looked like stone at a glance, dull gray, fine-grained, but the texture was too perfect. Natural rock kept a memory of pressure, of random clasts and tiny fossils. This had none of that. It was uniform, like stone grown in a vat. Harold picked up a hand lens and rolled the core gently. Synthetic lithic composite, he said, probably cast in place, or maybe grown molecule by molecule. The Tartarian base walls use similar blends, but on a smaller scale. Farther in, the outer shell gave way to cleaner layers of pale material, intercut with bands of dull shine. Internal skin and frame, Megan said, like rebar in concrete, but far more advanced. A materials tech slid a spectrometer probe along the core. Numbers streamed across a nearby screen. High silicon, engineered crystal alignment, she said. Trace metals, titanium, vanadium, some rare earths. And here, that's not on any standard list. Meaning, Price asked. Meaning, our reference library does not know what to call it, the tech said. It behaves like a metal, but the lattice spacing isn't normal. The spectra say it's tuned. Harold's eyes gleamed. Smart material. The Tartarian ruins use similar alloys in joints that still move a little, even now, like muscles that refuse to fully die. Megan frowned. But those ruins are broken, half melted. Whatever they were, they're not active. And yet the design lingers, Harold said. You cover a skeleton in sand, and thousands of years later its shape remains. These frames are like that, but built to last not just thousands, but hundreds of thousands of years. Megan pointed to a darker band deep in the core. What about this? The tech zoomed in. Ultra-dense layer, she said. Gravimetric reading spikes right here. Could be load-bearing or shielding, or both. Do we have any cavities yet? Price asked. Actual hollows? Megan brought up the latest drill log. At 32 meters, the bit hit empty space. Pressure dropped. The rig registered a void. Size unknown so far. Can we see it? Harold asked. A remote scan from the borehole camera popped open. The feed was shaky, full of noise. Then the view steadied, and they looked into a dark, rectangular space. The walls were smooth and uniform. The ceiling, just visible in the upper frame, ran flat and unbroken. The floor showed a faint grid texture, like shallow channels crisscrossing. No dust, Megan noted. No rubble. No mineral seep. This cavity has never been open to air. How big? Price asked. Early estimate 4 meters by 6, at least 10 meters long in this slice, a survey tech said. We haven't reached its far wall yet. Looks like a hallway, Harold murmured, or an access shaft. Price turned to Megan. What does your geology say about this? She gave a short, humorless laugh. My geology says there should not be straight, hollow corridors inside synthetic stone that appeared out of nowhere. Good, Harold said. That means your geology is still sane. He moved closer to the display, eyes tracing the clean lines of the hidden hall. The Tartarian substructures we've found under Eurasia are all in ruins. Collapsed tunnels, crushed chambers. But the plans we reconstructed hint at vast networks, perfectly aligned and sealed. This is like seeing one brand new. Megan rubbed her temples. So either an ancient civilization survived and is now building new structures with the same design, or someone has access to those same plans. Harold shook his head slowly. Survival is a loaded term. When you build for geological timescales, alive and dead lose meaning. Systems can sleep. Sleep? Price said. Harold nodded. Dormant. Waiting for conditions to match some template. Temperature, chemistry, magnetic field, human technology level. Who knows? He turned back to Megan. You spent your life watching slow crustal changes. Imagine planning projects on that scale, but with tools that can shape rock as easily as we shape plastic. You would not think in decades. You would think in ages. A soft chime cut him off. Another scan had finished. The hologram updated, showing more of the internal grid. Now the pattern was hard to deny. The mountains inside looked like a gigantic building system. Halls, vertical shafts, thicker hubs at intersections. Harold pulled up an old plan from a dig under the Caspian Sea. A lost Tartarian foundation, half eroded, spread across the display. Long galleries, vertical ducts, and wide dome-like nodes. He overlaid part of that plan onto the mountain's inner map. Lines matched, ratios aligned. Where the old plan showed a missing support in the ruin, the mountain had a complete, strong version. "It's not just similar," Megan said quietly. "It's an upgrade, a newer build." Harold nodded, as if someone took the same core ideas and improved them, then installed the result here. "Installed," Price repeated. "Like infrastructure." Megan looked from Harold's ancient ruins to the clean grid inside the living mountain. "Those Eurasian sites," she said. "We always thought they were cities or temples or something symbolic." Harold's gaze was steady. "That was never my belief. To me, they were always tools, foundations for machines larger than any city, carrier frames for something more important than a city." Price asked. "Power distribution, field control, information storage. Things we still argue about," Harold said. "But whatever they were not built for show. They were built to last and to do work over a very long time." Megan felt a cold, clear thought settle in her mind. Then this mountain isn't just a structure. It's a functional part of some system. Harold inclined his head. "Exactly." She brought up a map of the world and overlaid known Tartarian ruin sites. Red dots lit up across Central Asia, Eastern Europe, under ancient seabeds. All old, all broken. Then she highlighted Wyoming. A single bright point glowed on the other side of the globe, in the middle of North America. "After everything we have dug up," she said, "after all the half-collapsed frames and buried walls, the first complete example appears here, in my basin." "Not your basin anymore," Price said softly. "Not Earth's either, if we're honest." Harold tapped several Tartarian dots. Then the Wyoming point. "Notice the spacing," he said. "Long arcs following old stable cratons. Sites placed where the crust is thick and quiet. Places meant to stay put for millions of years. Like the Bighorn Basin," Megan said. "Exactly," Harold said. "These builders liked stable platforms. They planted their foundations where tectonic fury calmed." Price watched the patterns. "So this is not random, not a freak event." "No," Harold said. "This is part of a plan so large our minds keep trying to reduce it to myth." Another chime. A second core sample had finished its journey. This one reached 50 meters in, crossing 2 internal beams and punching through the far side of the first hall. It caught the edge of another cavity, a vertical shaft dropping beyond the camera's light. The feed showed its inner surface, flawless, with faint repeating grooves that spiraled downward. "Transport channel," Harold guessed. "Maybe for vehicles, maybe for fields." Megan's hand tightened on the table. "All of this has been under our feet? All this time?" Harold looked tired now. "Under some feet, yes. Not all. But the Tartarian ruins were never random. They were pieces, fragments of a broken ring. I always suspected there were intact parts elsewhere. I did not expect them to rise in front of satellites." Price straightened. "So what are we dealing with, in simple terms, for the record?" Harold thought for a moment, then spoke clearly. "We are standing next to a newly exposed node of a planet-scale infrastructure system," he said, "built with the same design logic as the oldest advanced ruins on record, shaped to last longer than our species has existed. And purpose?" Price pressed. Harold looked at the towering mountain wall outside. "Purpose is still a guess," he said. "But nothing about this says monument. It says machine. A machine meant to be quiet for a very long time, then useful again." Megan stared at the scan, at the smooth hall that had never known air, at the shaft that plunged into engineered dark. "What if this isn't old?" she said slowly. "What if this is new construction, using old plans? Who has the ability to build this under our noses?" Harold's voice was soft. "Sometimes, Dr. Lawson, a project is so much larger than a species that the word new loses meaning. To the builder, this might still be phase 1. Megan met his gaze. "Builder, you think they're still out there?" Harold did not answer. Instead, he pointed back to the mountain's interior. "Right now, what matters is this," he said. "Someone, or something, placed this structure here. It matches lost frames on the other side of the world. It remained hidden until today." He looked from Megan to Price. "The important question is not who," he said. It is why this node is awake now. Outside, the sun shifted, and the shadow of the impossible range crept farther across the prairie, sliding over old ground that suddenly felt very young. By dawn the next day, the air around the mountain felt different. Megan could not explain it at first. The sky was the same hard blue. The prairie still stretched out dry and flat, but her instruments had started to argue with her eyes. She stood in the sensor yard, a flat patch of ground filled with tripods and boxy devices. A portable gravimeter sat on a low stand, its display flickering with steady lines. Baseline gravity, local, she said, reading the numbers. Slightly high for this latitude, but within expected range for thick crust. A tech named Rhea stood beside a tall, ring-shaped magnetometer. Magnetic field still flaring, she reported. We're seeing dense lobes around the range, like a distorted donut. Lines bend, twist, then snap back farther out. Megan frowned. Field strength? Up to 20% above background in hot spots, Rhea said. But no radiation leak, no particle spray. It's all organized. Megan looked toward the dark wall that cut across the land. If she closed her eyes, she could almost feel a pressure, like standing too near a huge, silent machine. Price walked up, tablet in hand. His face looked more drawn than yesterday. Global Net just flagged something, he said without greeting. New anomalies detected. Where? Megan asked. He spun the tablet toward her. A world map appeared, covered in a faint grid. Several points glowed orange. Southwestern Australia, he said, tapping one. A flat salt pan picked up a sudden shift in gravitational micro-variations. No visible terrain change yet, but the pattern curve matches what we saw here in the Bighorn Basin 10 hours before the mountain appeared. He tapped another point. Northern Algeria, a desolate plateau. Slight magnetic warping in a tight ring. Again, same pre-event signature. More points lit up as he spoke. A stretch of deep ocean west of Chile, a frozen plain in eastern Siberia, a desert in western China. They're everywhere, Megan said. Not everywhere, Harold said as he joined them, breath puffing slightly in the cool morning air. Notice the pattern. All on or near old stable cratons. Thick, calm crust. Just like here. He traced an arc, connecting several of the glowing points. They form a rough belt. Not perfect, but close. Megan zoomed in on the data for northern Algeria. Tiny shifts in local gravity formed a ring. Magnetic readings there showed a faint bulge, as if something beneath the surface were bending field lines. None of these have popped yet, she said. No new ranges, just pre-symptoms. Price nodded, which means Wyoming is still the only fully surface structure. Rhea tapped her magnetometer. And this surface structure is doing something right now. The field fluctuations are not random. Look at this. She pulled up a time graph. The magnetic strength rose and fell in regular waves. Period is exactly 6 minutes. Rhea said. Field swells, then eases, like a slow pulse. Harold watched the graph. Status check, he said quietly. The system stretching its limbs. Megan looked from the pulsing field line to the glowing dots on the world map. Could this mountain be talking to those sites? She asked. Rhea shrugged. Field waves die off within a few 100 kilometers. Past that, they blend into background noise. If there's a signal, it's subtle or traveling some other way. Gravitational? Harold mused. Seismic at frequencies we do not monitor? Or something we do not even have a name for yet? Price cut in. Speculation is fine, but we have another issue. The field pattern changed at 0317 local and did this. He brought up a three-dimensional scan of the mountain taken overnight. 2 snapshots flashed, 02L and 04. Megan leaned in. The stone layout was almost identical between the scans, down to fine surface marks. But inside, something had shifted. There, she said, pointing. In the second scan, a narrow vertical shaft that had been sealed now showed a gap at its base, near ground level. The internal map marked it with a faint glow. Was this always open? She asked. Rhea shook her head. No, we scanned that spot yesterday. Solid. Now the material there reads as absent on all frequencies we use. Not broken, not moved aside, just not there. Price's jaw clenched. An access point. Harold's eyes widened. So the structure is not just sitting here. It is reconfiguring itself. Megan felt a tight knot of both fear and curiosity in her chest. How close is it to the surface? She asked. Rhea overlaid terrain data. The new opening sat 10 meters above ground, on a steep, smooth section of the wall. Too high to reach from ground, Rhea said. Too low for normal climbing gear to be safe on that glassy rock. Price looked at Megan, then at the mountain. We can reach it, he said. We have gear. The question is, should we? Harold gave a dry cough. If a door appears in a structure that has been asleep for tens of thousands of years, it is either an invitation, a test, or both. Megan stared at the glowing marker, or a trap. Rhea spoke softly. Sensors inside that cavity show no atmosphere. Pressure near zero, no heat variation, no movement. Dead air, Price said. Harold smiled faintly. Or perfect storage conditions. Price took a deep breath. Command wants eyes on the inside. The longer we wait, the more likely it is that someone else gets curious. We can keep this secret forever. He turned to Megan. You know the internal layout better than anyone. If we go in, I want you there. Megan's heart kicked once hard. She had spent her life watching the crust from above, never inside structures like this. I'm not a cave diver, she said. I'm a modeler. Harold chuckled. Today you are both. I will go as well. I did not spend decades chasing Tartarian ruins just to stop at the door of a pristine example. Price's gaze stayed on Megan. You can say no. She looked back at the mountain. The idea of staying outside while others walked through a live Tartarian structure felt worse than her fear. He'll go, she said, but we do it carefully. Tethers, full suits, constant sensor feed. Price nodded. Already arranged. Gear up. The suit felt heavier than Megan expected. It wrapped her in a thin, smart layer that regulated temperature and filtered air. External armor plates protected against blunt impact and unknown chemical agents. A sleek helmet closed around her head, sealing with a soft hiss. Comms check. Price's voice came through her earpiece. Loud and clear, Megan answered. Same, Harold said, though these things always make me feel like a turtle. Rhea's voice joined in. She would stay outside as their link to the surface systems. Telemetry live. Vitals stable. Suit integrity 100%. Helmets are recording. A crane had been brought to the cliff base, its arm reaching up toward the new opening. A narrow platform dangled from the end, large enough for 3 suited figures. The dark wall towered above them, smooth and strange. The fresh access point was a small, neat rectangle in the stone, black as if filled with ink. Megan stepped onto the platform with Price and Harold. The crane groaned softly as it lifted them. The ground fell away. The cliff face slid past, close enough to touch. At this range, Megan could see faint lines in the stone, like growth rings. Still no radiation spikes, Rhea reported in her ear. Magnetic field stable. Gravity boring. Boring is good, Price said. Megan's heartbeat thudded in her chest. She forced herself to keep her breathing steady. The platform bumped gently against the wall. The opening was right in front of them now. Up close, it was unnerving. It was a perfect rectangle, 2 meters high and 1 meter across, cut into the synthetic stone with knife-edge precision. The interior was matte black, swallowing light. It felt less like a tunnel and more like a sudden absence of matter. Megan raised her gloved hand and reached toward the threshold. Hold, Rhea said quickly. Let me scan it again. A small drone buzzed up from below, pausing at the opening. Thin beams swept across the blackness. Readings? Price asked. Interior pressure near zero, Rhea said. No measurable gas mix. Temperature steady at 3 degrees Celsius. No particles. No movement. It's like a sealed box that just omitted its front wall. Omitted, Harold repeated. Not broken. Not cut, like the material phase shifted out of the way. Megan swallowed. Are we sending in a probe first? Already did, Rhea said. A micro-drone went in 30 minutes ago. It flew 20 meters and found a cross corridor. No hazards detected. Feed is clean. The image appeared inside Megan's visor, a hallway of smooth, pale material. lined with faint grooves. The floor had a subtle grid pattern formed by shallow, regular channels. "Looks like the borehole cavity we saw," she said. Price's hand tightened on the safety rail. "All right, we go in. Megan first. You call out anything that doesn't make sense geologically. Harold behind her. He'll bring up the rear." Megan stepped off the platform and into the black. For half a second, her body braced for impact as if expecting a hidden wall. There was only emptiness. Her boots touched a solid surface that felt slightly springy, not like stone. Her suit lights flared, painting the space in white. She stood in a narrow hall that ran straight into the mountain. The walls were a dull, uniform gray-white, with no visible joins or seams. The ceiling arched just enough to clear her helmet. The floor grid pattern matched the micro-drone feed exactly. "It's like standing inside a bone," she said, awe cutting through her fear. "A synthetic bone." Harold stepped in behind her, suit lights adding to the glow. "Tartarian internal finish," he said. "I've seen fragments, but never a full haul. They always use this clean style for functional spaces." Price entered last. "Doorway remains open," he reported. "No reaction to our entry." Rias' voice came through. "All suit feeds stable. You are 5 meters inside. Proceed when ready." Megan took a slow step forward, then another. Her boots made almost no sound on the floor. The material seemed to absorb impact. She ran her gloved fingers along the wall. It felt very slightly warm, like skin. "Any readings from the wall?" she asked. "Surface temp 3.1 degrees, Ria said. "Infrared shows no variation. No electrical fields detected above background." Harold stopped to study the shallow grooves on the walls. They formed faint parallel lines running the length of the corridor. "Conduits," he said. "They used surface channels for low-energy transfers. Heat, maybe. Or information in a form we don't use." Megan frowned. "No cables. No signs of wear. It's like this place was finished yesterday. Or finished a very, very long time ago, then sealed," Harold said. "Age does not show the same way if nothing moves, nothing breathes, nothing corrodes." They reached the cross corridor the micro-drone had found. It intersected at a perfect right angle, forming a T-junction. "To the left, the shaft we saw in the second core," Ria said. "To the right, unknown. I recommend left first. We know something is there." "Agreed," Price said. They turned left. The hall continued for another 10 meters, then opened onto a wide, round void in the floor. The vertical shaft dropped away, perfectly circular, walls smooth and faintly ridged. Megan walked carefully to the edge and shone her light down. The beam vanished into darkness, long before it reached any bottom. "How deep?" she asked. "Core penetration hit it at 50 meters, Ria said. "But the shaft continues beyond. Our sonar ping from the drone got a return at about 300 meters down. Could go farther." Harold peered over the edge. "Transport, for sure. The grooves on the wall spiral like a slow screw, maybe for guiding something that moves up and down." Megan checked the local gravity reading in her visor. "Pull is normal here," she said. "No signs of lift fields or anything strange. Maybe it's off," Price said. "Maybe it has not needed to turn on yet," Harold added. Megan watched the darkness below. Her mind tried to build a picture. Huge elevators, streams of unknown cargo, people or not people riding up and down. "Any sign the structure reacts to us?" she asked. "Vibration change? Field shift?" Ria hesitated. "This is going to sound odd," she said. "Magnetic field around the mountain shell is stable. But inside," she paused, then continued. "Inside, I'm seeing small, localized ripples. Every time you step, the readings twitch, like the material knows you are there." Megan's mouth went dry. "The walls are sensing us. Could be mass sensors in the floor," Ria said. "Or internal fields adjusting. Nothing hostile, just responsive." Harold smiled slightly. Why build a giant machine and not give it awareness of its own interior? This may be normal for it. Price's hand moved toward his sidearm without thinking, then stopped. A gun would be useless here, Megan thought. This place was beyond bullets. "Any heat spike?" he asked. "None. Rhea said. No moving parts, no motors, no power conduits, lighting up. Whatever is aware in there, it is very efficient. Megan looked at the shaft again. We're not going down there today, she said firmly. We don't have the gear or the understanding. Price exhaled, tension easing slightly. Agreed. Command would love it, but I'm not bringing a team into a 300-meter drop inside an alien elevator shaft without a lot more prep. Not alien, Harold corrected calmly. We keep saying ancient and alien, as if those are opposite ends. They might be the same. Megan forced herself to turn away from the dark hole. The corridor extended beyond it, a straight line deeper into the mountain. Rhea, she said, what does the scan show ahead of us? Rhea overlaid the full internal map into their visors. Thin lines traced halls, curves marked thicker structural bands. Directly ahead, the corridor cut through several frames and led toward a larger cavity symbol near the mountain's center. Long perpendicular. That, she said, highlighting it, is a chamber about 15 meters across, roughly spherical. We got partial returns yesterday. Could be a node, or a control space, or just a structural joint. Harold's voice held a note of excitement. We should see it. Price's reply was brisk. We go halfway, then reevaluate. No heroics. They moved on, boots silent on the strange floor. As they walked, Megan noticed a faint vibration, like the barest hum, under her feet. It was not sound. Her ears heard nothing. It was more like a feeling in her bones. Do you feel that? She asked. Feel what? Price said. Harold paused. Yes, a very low-frequency tremor, not seismic, almost like a heartbeat. If the body was made of stone. Rhea cut in. Sensors show no quake activity, but our gravimeter just outside the wall is picking up micro-oscillations. Very small, regular, tied to the same 6-minute magnetic cycle. Status checks again, Harold said under his breath. Or something ramping up, Megan murmured. The corridor bent slightly, then widened. Ahead, the space opened into the larger chamber. They reached the threshold and stopped. The room was indeed almost a sphere, flattened slightly at top and bottom. The walls were the same pale, seamless material as the halls. But here, faint patterns marked the surface, raised lines and depressions, forming rings and grids. In the center of the floor, a low platform rose, about a meter high, circular, with a smooth top. No loose objects, Price noted. No consoles, no chairs, no furniture of any kind. Harold slowly approached the platform. Tartarian central nodes were never full of clutter, he said. They used clean spaces, relying on fields and interfaces we still do not understand. Megan's gaze moved over the wall patterns. Her visor highlighted repeating curves that lined up with known stress points in the mountain shell. This chamber sits right at a main load crossing, she said, like a joint where major beams meet. The design spreads strain evenly, like a control room inside a backbone, Harold said. Fitting. Megan stepped closer to the platform. Her suit lights caught a slight sheen on its surface, as if it had a different finish than the rest of the room. Rhea, any readings from the platform? She asked. Mass denser than surrounding floor, Rhea replied. Composition similar but not identical. Slightly higher presence of that unknown tuned metal. No heat or field spikes. What happens if I touch it? Megan asked. Do not, Price said at once. Harold chuckled. We sent in a micro-drone earlier, remember? It landed on the platform, rolled about, and nothing happened. Machines might not trigger what living bodies do, Price shot back. Megan hovered her hand over the platform, not quite touching. Even through her glove she felt something. A faint tingling, like static. Field gradient at your hand position, Rhea said quickly. It just rose by 0.03%. Still safe, but it noticed you. It noticed me, Megan repeated. The field strength changed exactly where your hand is, Rhea said. Not elsewhere. It's like pushing down on a trampoline. Pull back, Price ordered. Megan did, fighting the urge to make contact. As her hand moved away, the tiny field shift eased. The whole structure is sensing mass and proximity. Harold said. "It may have done that for ages, or it may be a recent change. Either way, it is not dead." Price looked around once more, then spoke with finality. "That's enough for today," he said. "We have confirmed internal halls, a major shaft, and a central node that reacts to us. We go back, process the data, plan a proper second entry." Megan wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Curiosity battled with caution inside her chest. "Fine," she said, "but we have to face what this means." She gestured at the smooth walls, the platform, the endless shaft behind them. "This is not just a weird mountain," she said. "This is installed infrastructure. Someone built this as part of a system that covers stable regions of the planet. They hid it inside fake stone, set it to sleep, then something told it to wake up." Harold nodded. "And the anomalies lighting up across the globe are likely more of the same. Nodes stretching, preparing." Price's voice was tight. "Installed for what? For who?" Megan thought of her crust models, of plates sliding over deep mantle rock, of slow, patient uplift. All her life, she had trusted that deep time told the story of Earth. Now it felt like that story had footnotes written by an unseen engineer. "Maybe not for us at all," she said. "Maybe we're just living in the gaps between phases of a much longer project." Harold turned slowly, taking in every surface of the chamber, as if he could absorb its meaning through his eyes. "A planet-sized machine," he said quietly, "built to last, with parts that come to the surface when needed and sink back when done." Price stared at the platform, at the patterns in the wall. "If that's true," he said, "then either we are the builders, we are the heirs, or we are just tenants, living in someone else's property without knowing it." Megan met his gaze through her visor. "Whatever we are," she said, "the landlord just started moving furniture." Ria's voice cut through the silence. "Field cycle spike in 10 seconds, she said. "Same 6-minute pattern, but stronger. I recommend you leave the chamber before it peaks." Megan felt that faint thrumming in her bones rise a little. "Agreed," Price said. "Back to the entrance." "Now." They turned and walked out, the central node at their backs. As they moved down the hall, Megan glanced once over her shoulder. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw the wall patterns shift, just a tiny bit, as if the room was taking a slow breath. Then it was gone, and the pale, perfect surface looked as still as ever. Outside, the prairie waited under the wide Wyoming sky. The mountain's dark shell loomed over it all, silent and patient. Beneath their feet, Megan knew now, something vast had begun to stir. The alert woke Megan before sunrise. Her bunk in the field module shook gently as the system lights brightened from dark blue to white. A sharp tone pulsed in the room, 3 times, then cut off. "Terrain event," the base AI said. "Priority top." Megan pushed herself upright, heart thumping. Her display band showed the time, 04A3. She was already half-dressed when Price's voice came through her earpiece. "Lawson, get to the main lab. Now." "I'm on my way," she said. Outside, the air was cold and thin. The sky to the east held a faint line of gray where dawn would come. The mountain range was just a dark mass against the stars, silent and solid, but the camp around it buzzed like a kicked nest. People ran between modules, drones lifted in straight lines. Sensor towers flashed with new readings. Megan jogged across the packed soil to the main lab, stepping over cables and past humming machines. Her legs still ached from the previous day's walk inside the mountain, but adrenaline dulled the pain. Inside, the lab lights were bright, screens filled every wall. Price stood at the central console, jaw tight. Harold was already there, hair wild, still pulling on a jacket. "What happened?" Megan asked, breathing hard. Price turned his tablet so both of them could see. A world map filled the screen, and this time the glowing points were not orange. They were red. "Southwestern Australia," he said, tapping, "at exactly 0321 Wyoming time. A flat salt pan went from level ground to a ridge field 200 meters high in less than 20 minutes. No quakes, no sound. Same scan signature as here." He tapped another point. "Northern Algeria." A block of plateau rose into a sharp, stepped formation. Again, no seismic activity, Just there. He zoomed out. Several more red points appeared. A line of new, low ridges under Siberian ice. A ring of small islands surfacing in the ocean west of Chile. A strange spiraling mound in the western China desert. It started, Harold said softly. Megan stared at the map. All triggered in the last hour. First one in Australia, Price said. The rest followed in a wave pattern, roughly tracking nightfall across their regions. Harold squinted at the timestamp overlay. Look at the gaps between each event. 12 minutes, same as the satellite passes we saw here on day 1. There is a cadence. Megan's mind jumped to the pulsing magnetic readings Rhea had shown her yesterday. 6-minute cycles. Now a 12-minute spacing in activations. It's a timing system, she said. The network is waking up in steps. Rhea's voice came in over the lab speakers. Adding new data, she said. Gravimetric stations worldwide confirm micro-oscillations in old stable crust zones, not just at the new sites. The whole shield network is humming. The global map changed. Pale blue lines appeared, tracing the ancient, thick pieces of Earth's crust. Canada, Greenland, Siberia, Western Australia, parts of Africa and South America. Along those stable shields, faint dots marked known Tartarian ruins. Now more dots appeared where the new events had hit. Harold stepped closer. They're filling in the gaps, he said. Old ruins in Eurasia were just the broken pieces that stuck out. The real network lies under these stable blocks, and now some of its main nodes are surfacing. Price zoomed in on the new Australian ridges. High-resolution satellite shots showed sharp, clean structures bursting from the salt pan, pale against the reddish earth. These look different from our range, he said. Lower, more spread out. But internal scans show the same alloy frameworks. Different shape, same bones. Megan watched as more data streamed in. A Siberian ice hump with smooth, hidden sides. A Chilean seamount that had turned into a ring of even pillars climbing out of the ocean. The Chinese desert mound with a spiral ramp cut into its side like a coiled road. They're not all mountains, she said. Some are platforms, some are pillars, but all have that same artificial frame. Rhea spoke again. Magnetic field changes match our 6-minute pulse, but now there's a long wave pattern laid over it, like the whole system is sinking. A hush fell over the lab as everyone watched the map. Megan felt a strange mix of fear and recognition. The world had changed in a way only a tectonic imaging specialist could fully see. Her life's work had been about slow movement, the steady crawl of plates, the rise and fall of ranges over millions of years. She knew where stress built, where old faults slept, where the crust was thick and lazy. Now all those quiet places were lighting up. Price broke the silence. Global response teams are scrambling, he said. Some governments still think these are new weapons tests. Some think they're natural disasters. Some think other things. Let them argue, Harold said. The physics does not care what story they choose. This is artificial. This is planned. He turned to Megan. You see it, don't you? She nodded slowly. They're placed on the cratons, the oldest, thickest pieces of crust, the parts least likely to crack or shift. She brought up a separate model, her old detailed map of Earth's crust, colored by age and thickness. It glowed over the world map like a ghost. The new nodes lined up along those stable zones almost perfectly. I've always mapped where mountains form from plate collision, she said. Himalayas, Andes, Rockies, vast, messy places. She pointed to the glowing shield zones instead. This network ignores those. It likes calm platforms, the kind that stay still for ages. Because you don't build vital infrastructure on a fault line, Harold said. You build on bedrock that will not move. Megan's throat felt tight. I've been staring at this bedrock for years. I thought it was just a background, a stage where slow stories played out. Price's voice softened. Now you see it was already part of a different story. Rhea cut in again. There's more. Look at the timing against your crust model. She overlaid another set of data, subtle, slow changes in crust density and heat flow that Megan had tracked for years as part of her long-term research. These regions weren't just picked because they're stable, Rhea said. Their internal heat patterns, mineral mixes, even water content over the last million years, they all match a narrow band of values. Someone needed very specific conditions. Harold gave a low whistle. They planned around the deep mantle, around long-term cooling, around water cycles. This system was meant to run across many different ages of the planet. Megan stared at the layers of maps: crust age, heat flow, anomaly sites. A pattern was forming that only a tectonic expert could fully read. Her models had never been built to look for artificial markers, but now she saw them. "Look at the gaps," she said suddenly. She stripped away the noise and highlighted only shield zones that had no Tartarian ruins, no new anomalies, no known structures. Several empty patches remained, big ones: northern Canada, parts of Brazil, segments under the Indian Ocean. "There," she said, pointing. "These are likely sites that haven't surfaced yet. But the deep readings show the same faint gravity tweaks, the same heat flow shifts. Something is under there too." Price leaned over her shoulder. "You're saying you can predict where the next structures will pop up?" "Not all of them, not precisely," Megan said. "But I can give ranges. The network seems to favor certain spacings, certain distances between nodes. I can adjust my crust models to detect that pattern." Harold watched her with something like pride. "Your old career just turned into the most important predictive tool on Earth." Megan let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "I spent my life thinking nothing geologic could surprise me if I had enough data." She looked up at the looming mountain just beyond the lab window. "I was wrong," she said. "But that same data can help us now. I can read where this artificial crust is likely dense, where it's sparse. I can map the skeleton under our feet." Price nodded. "And that's your job, effective immediately." He spoke louder to the room. "Dr. Lawson heads predictive mapping for the anomalous terrain task force. Any incoming data on new events routes through her models first." A few techs glanced at Megan with new respect. She felt the weight of it. "You'll need full access to global sensor feeds," she said. "Old core logs, mine surveys, ocean floor scans, everything. And I'll need time." Price gave a short laugh. "You can have the data. Time, not so much. The world is waking up to this, and panic is spreading." Harold nodded. "The faster we understand the pattern, the more chance we have to act with some kind of sense instead of fear." Megan turned back to the data, fingers already moving, setting up new filters, marking likely hidden nodes on the crust map. Her old models had measured stress, temperature, uplift rate. Now she added new layers: Tartarian signature ratios, anomalous alloy hints from scattered drill samples, faint gravity curves that matched known nodes. Lines began to form. "See this?" she said, tapping a curve that arched from Wyoming through Canada, across Greenland, down toward northern Europe. "This is almost a great circle. Our range sits on it, so do several buried Eurasian ruins." She plotted another arc, from southwestern Australia, through parts of Antarctica, up under the South Atlantic. "And this one," she said, "the new Australian ridges line up here, as do a few odd deep ocean mass spikes we never explained." Harold's eyes widened. "You're drawing the backbone." "Like tracing a nervous system with only a few nerves lit up." "If I assume these arcs are main routes," Megan said slowly, "then nodes should appear at certain intervals along them. The Tartarian builders liked ratios, remember? 13 to 21, 37 to 61. If they applied that to spacing, she set the program to search for distance patterns between known nodes. Numbers flashed. "There," she said. "Average spacing along stable arcs is about 4,000 kilometers, with some variation. If I project that along the empty segments, new, faint markers appeared. Future sites, predicted, but not yet real." Price stared. "So we know where more of these might show up. Can we know when?" Megan hesitated. "Timing is harder. They might be linked to deep mantle shifts, to field cycles, to something we haven't measured at all." Rhea spoke again. "We do have one clue. The new events happen mostly along the line where night meets day, near the Terminator. Wyoming's mountain appeared during dawn here too." Megan blinked. "Sunlight?" Harold shook his head. "Not direct light, I think. The changing electromagnetic environment, the way the ionosphere shifts between night and day. They might be using that as a timing signal, or as cover, Price said. If you don't want to throw off global systems too noticeably, you hide your changes during natural cycles, when readings are already in flux. Megan rubbed her temples. So the crustal pattern tells us where. The field and day-night cycles might hint at when. Harold looked at her. Can your models combine those? Project likely windows of activation. I can try, she said, but even a rough map will help. We can warn regions, move people. Watch closer. Price nodded, jaw set. Do it. They'll fight for whatever access and authority you need. The lab hummed around them. The world outside their screens kept spinning. Blades of new stone cutting into skies and oceans in other time zones. Later that day, Megan found herself back on the summit of the Wyoming range. A small transport drone had dropped her, Price and Harold on a flat ledge near the highest point that field teams had declared safe. The air up here was cold and thin, but clear. The stone under her boots had the same synthetic, almost too smooth feel as the walls inside. From this height, the Bighorn Basin spread out below like a map. The prairie stretched in every direction. A faded green-brown sea. Old natural ranges framed the horizon in soft, weathered lines. The new mountain cut across it all like a fresh scar. Its peaks were sharp, untouched by erosion. No gullies yet, no scree slopes, just hard angles and crisp ridges. Megan walked to the edge and looked out. On the far horizon, she could see human scars too. Tiny clusters of buildings, faint lines of old roads, the straight cuts of mines long since closed. Against those, the new range felt permanent. This will outlast all of that, Harold said quietly, coming to stand beside her. Weather will smooth it, ice will bite it, but the frame inside will keep its shape, while entire nations are forgotten. Price stood a few steps back, scanning the sky and the mountaintop with his eyes, habit never sleeping. Megan lifted her tablet and opened the global model she had spent the last hours building. On the screen, Earth rotated slowly, studded with red marks where Tartarian ruins, new nodes, and predicted sites lay. Lines arced between them, forming something like a web on a sphere. It looks like a nervous system, she said, or a circuit, or roots, Harold said, reaching through crust instead of soil. Megan zoomed in on Wyoming. Their location blinked as a bright blue point at the center of a red halo. This place was always stable, she said, a quiet basin between older ranges. I grew up thinking of it as background. She turned to gaze back at the flatlands she knew so well. Ranch land, dry study sites, old riverbeds. Now I know it was chosen, she said, long before any of us were here, long before our oldest fossils. Price stepped up beside her. Chosen the way we choose where to put power plants, he said, carefully, with an eye on the future. Megan's eyes stayed on the horizon, which means what's rising now is not random. It's phase, something, part of a schedule. Harold nodded. We call it awakening because that makes sense to us. But to the builders, this might be simple maintenance, an upgrade, or stage 2 of 5. Stage 2 of what? Price asked. Harold shrugged. Earth as a host, a carrier, a machine frame for something larger. Information, energy, life, in a form we do not yet recognize. Megan glanced at her tablet. New notifications blinked. More minor anomalies, small shifts in microgravity, hints of buried structures deep under places she had once mapped as simple rock. If they built this for themselves, she said, then maybe they're coming back to use it. If they built it for their descendants, Harold replied, maybe we are those descendants, and just never knew it. Price gave a short, sharp laugh. You think we did this? Harold's gaze stayed on the far hills. I think it is possible that history is not a line but a circle, that some version of us has been here before, different enough that we do not recognize the mark. Megan thought of the Tartarian ruins, metal ribs in Eurasian depths, crushed domes under old seas. We study ruins and call them myths, she said, but they might be our own old work, or we are squatters, Price said. We moved into a building whose owner left for a while, thinking it dead, and now the lights are coming on again. Megan watched her global model spin. Builder, here, tenant, she said softly. I don't know which we are. Harold smiled faintly. Maybe the answer is different in different places. Maybe in some regions, humans have already wired themselves into this network without knowing. Maybe in others, we sit on top like birds on a power line, benefiting from fields we barely sense. Prices come pinged. He checked the message, then looked up. New instruction from command, he said. They want us to treat these nodes as critical infrastructure until we learn otherwise. No attempts to damage or shut them down. Study only. Megan snorted. Even if we wanted to shut them down. How? Drop bombs on synthetic rock, cut a few beams and hope it matters. This system spans continents. Price nodded. I think command knows that. The order is more about calming those who want to attack what they don't understand. Megan looked over the ridge again, at the old world and the new structure slicing through it. For years I thought tectonics was the slow, reliable story of the planet, she said. You could read the past in rocks, predict the future in strain lines. You still can, Harold said gently. Those laws haven't gone away. Plates still move, ranges still rise, erosion still wears things down. But now, Megan said, we know there's another story on top of that, or under it. Someone used that same slow knowledge to install a secret layer, a designed crust. She tapped her tablet. The predicted nodes glowed faintly, where the network map said more structures might appear. And my models can read that layer now, she said, at least enough to guess where the next mountains or platforms might show. Price studied her screen. So what's next? She zoomed in on northern Canada. There's a likely node under the shield near Great Bear Lake, she said. Deep. The pre-symptoms started 30 hours ago. Tiny shifts in gravity, field warping. If the pattern holds, something may surface there within the next few days, maybe at dawn local time. She slid the globe, another in Brazil's interior, one under the Indian Ocean. Others we haven't even flagged yet because our sensors aren't dense enough. Harold pulled his jacket tighter against the wind. You will need help, he said, a lot of it. More analysts, better instruments, deeper access to old data. Megan nodded. We'll build a team, maybe a global one. Train people to read the artificial crust the way geologists read strata. Price looked from her to the dark backbone under their feet. Then for now, he said, we watch. We warn. We learn. A gust of wind swept over the summit, tugging at their clothes. Far below, the camp looked small, a cluster of metal boxes and antennae clinging to the base of something far bigger than any of their machines. Megan lowered her tablet and just looked at the horizon. In her mind, she saw glowing markers where the buried network lay, crossing under oceans and deserts, tying old continents together with beams and hollows. If this is a machine, she said quietly, maybe it has a purpose that includes us. Maybe not. Harold's voice was calm. Either way, we are now part of its operation. Our satellites watch it. Our sensors feed it information. Even if we don't mean to, our actions will matter. Price checked the sky, then the range again. Do you regret coming here? He asked Megan. She thought of her old office in Casper, her quiet models, her belief that Earth was understandable if you just stared long enough. Then she thought of the moment the mountain first appeared on the satellite feed, the halls inside that had never known air, the way the platform had tingled under her hand, the global map lighting up with new nodes. No, she said, I regret that we were blind for so long, but I don't regret seeing now. She took a breath of the cold, thin air. I spent my life trying to predict slow changes in rock, she went on. Now I'm trying to predict the moves of a planet-scale machine we barely understand. She managed a small, rough smile. It's still tectonics, she said, just not the kind I expected. Her tablet pinged softly in her hand. Another anomaly had appeared on the map, a tiny, fresh dot in the Indian Ocean, right where her model said a node might lie. She watched it blink, then settle. Another piece is stirring, she said. Price and Harold looked at the screen, then at each other. We won't be able to control this, Price said, but maybe we can at least not be surprised by it. Being able to see the pattern is the first step, Harold added. Megan tilted the tablet so the Wyoming node and the new ocean point both showed at once. "We're late to this story," she said. "We may not be the authors, but we are here now, watching the next chapter start." Below them, the artificial range sat on its fake stone shell, its hidden halls, sensing weight and motion, its central nodes pulsing in slow, deep cycles. Above, the sky brightened a little more. The first touch of true sunrise hit the highest peak, turning its sharp edge pale gold. Megan stood at the summit of the impossible range and watched the light slide across it, then out toward the distant land where more red points waited to appear. "Builder, heir, or tenant," she murmured. "Whatever we are, we live on a wired planet." Her tablet chimed again as more faint anomalies flickered onto the global model, like stars coming out in reverse. She tightened her grip on the device. "Let's see where it moves next," she said. Megan's office looked nothing like the quiet room she had used in Casper years ago. Back then, she had a single wall display, a few sample rocks on a shelf, and a window that faced low hills. Now she sat in a glass-walled hub inside the Global Anomalous Terrain Center, built on a bluff outside Cheyenne. Screens wrapped around her in a half-circle. The largest showed a live, slowly turning model of Earth's crust. Red, orange, and blue points marked active nodes, dormant sites, and predicted locations. Faint arcs and bands traced stress lines and field flows. Outside the glass, rows of analysts worked at stations. Voices rose and fell. Data scrolled. The whole place felt like the nerve center of a living thing. Soft chimes sounded. "New event," the system said. "Low intensity. Location, northern Canada. Status, surfacing complete. No casualties." Megan tapped her wristband. The Canadian shield jumped into focus. A small dot, orange turning slowly to red, pulsed near Great Bear Lake. Right on schedule, she said to herself. She had marked that spot months ago as a likely node. Local communities had been warned. Camps had shifted when the ground there had lifted into low, smooth domes overnight. The nearest person had been 50 kilometers away. She zoomed out again. The global map was full of colors now. Wyoming, Australia, Algeria, Siberia, the Indian Ocean, Brazil. Dozens of nodes, large and small, had surfaced or half-surfaced over the last 2 years. Some were tall ranges, like her own. Some were low plates that sat just above the ground, like giant flat bones. Some were strange rings in shallow ocean, barely breaking the waves, but strong enough to turn aside currents. Around many of them, life had adjusted. In Australia, a small research town had grown at the edge of the new ridges, studying how their fields slowed storms. In Algeria, farmers had learned that crops grew better near some parts of the stepped plateau, worse near others. In Siberia, reindeer herders had changed their routes to avoid unearthed shafts, grumbling but adapting. The planet had not cracked. Seas had not boiled. The sky still looked the same, but under everything, the network hummed. "Dr. Lawson," a voice said at her door. She turned. Rhea stood there, older now, hair streaked with gray, a tablet under her arm. Harold leaned on a cane beside her, moving a little slower these days, but with the same sharp eyes. "You have a minute?" Rhea asked. Megan smiled. "For you two?" "Always." They stepped inside. The glass door hissed shut, muting the noise outside. Rhea put the tablet on Megan's desk and brought up a file. "New readings from the Indian Ocean node," she said. "The deep pulse is steady, but the high-frequency pattern has settled into something regular." Megan glanced at the screen. Graphs rose and fell in tight, repeating shapes. "Still looks like code to me," she said. Harold nodded. "We've matched parts of it to tiny field shifts in old Tartarian sites," he said. "Like we thought before. But now, for the first time, we've found a piece that matches a more recent pattern too." He tapped the display, zooming in on a cluster of spikes. "This segment," he said, "lines up with an odd anomaly recorded 30 years ago during a deep ocean survey. Back then, it looked like noise. Now it looks like a signature." Megan leaned closer. "So the system was talking even then," she said. "Just so faintly we could not hear it." Rhea nodded. like a heart with a slow murmur, waiting for the rest of the body to wake up. Megan sat back. Can we read it yet? Really read it. Not like a book, Harold said. More like mood. We can tell when nodes are sinking, when they are steady, when they are slightly stressed. But we still don't know the words. That may be enough for now, Megan said. You don't need to know every thought of a person to see if they're about to fall. Rhea smiled. That's what you always say about plates and stress, too. Megan tapped her desk, bringing up another view. It showed not the nodes themselves, but human layers. Cities, flight paths, power grids, drawn over the crust map. Clusters glowed where people had moved away from likely future nodes. Other clusters glowed where new settlements had grown, near gentle parts of the network, taking advantage of strange benefits, calmer weather, more stable ground, small but useful boosts in plant growth. We've done better than I hoped, she said. No major city lost to a surfacing event. Only a few hard cases where we had to argue with local leaders to move communities. Harold's eyes softened. That's because of you, he said. Your maps, your warnings, your stubborn insistence on simple language. Megan shook her head. Because of all of us. I could not have done anything alone. Rhea tilted her head. You remember Denver? She asked. That first big meeting? Half the room wanted to blow Wyoming off the map. I remember, Megan said. Now some of those same people send their kids to study in the node towns. Harold chuckled. Fear is strong. So is curiosity. Megan looked back at the main screen. How's public feeling today? She asked. Rhea shrugged. Depends who you ask. Some are still scared. Some treat the nodes like holy sites. Some see them as job opportunities. Most, I think, have added buried planet machine to the long list of strange things about this century and gone back to their lives. Harold tapped his cane lightly on the floor. We get used to living on stories we don't fully understand, he said. That's not new. Speaking of stories, Rhea said we wanted to show you this. She brought up a map of Europe and Western Asia. Tiny markers glowed where old Tartarian ruins lay. Another set of markers showed newer, human-built sites, labs, observatories, even small villages. Look, she said, we've started building around their old foundations, carefully, with respect, but people are blending. The screen showed an image from Georgia, a sleek modern lab built on pillars, above a field of ancient metal ribs. Another from Kazakhstan showed children playing on a safe, sealed platform that was part human-made, part Tartarian, overlooking a wide plain. We're not just tenants anymore, Rhea said. We're partners, a little. Megan felt a strange warmth in her chest. Or pests, she said lightly. Helpful pests. Harold smiled. Ants in the wiring. Sometimes ants and houses find a way to coexist. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the rotating globe, the pulsing points. So Rhea said softly, which are we? Builder, heir, or tenant? Megan looked at her reflection faintly, layered over the earth on the screen. She saw a face more lined than before, eyes more tired but more certain. I think, she said slowly, we're a mix. She turned and faced them both. We did not build this, she said, not in this era. The designs and ages are too far back. That belongs to whoever came before. She lifted a hand toward the red points on the globe. But we're not just tenants either, she went on. We're learning the circuits, tapping into gentle currents without breaking things, building our own systems around the nodes instead of on top of them. She thought of the small wind farms that now sat in safe field zones beside nodes, using stable air, the data cables that hugged framework lines to stay secure during quakes, the new global warning networks that took their cues from deep pulses instead of just surface shakes. That sounds like heirs to me, she said. Not blood heirs, maybe, but chosen by circumstance. We live on what they left. We add to it. We adapt. Harold nodded slowly. Tenants who have found the maintenance closet, he said, and started reading the old manuals. Rhea laughed. Manuals written in gravity and magnetism, she said. My favorite kind. Megan checked the time. We have that outreach call in 10 minutes, she said. The students from Nairobi Node School. Harold's eyes brightened. Ah, yes. The children who grew up watching a network awaken. Go get ready, Megan said. He'll be right behind you. They left her alone in the office again. She turned back to the main screen, zooming one last time on Wyoming. The range still cut across the Bighorn Basin, its sharp peaks now dusted seasonally with snow. Around its base, careful roads led to protected research stations. The hall they had walked that first day was now part of a mapped route, with airlocks and monitoring points. The central node chamber remained mostly off-limits, but probes and cautious visits had shown more of its patterns. Long, the structure had still never lashed out. It had never spoken in anything like a human voice, but its cycles had become familiar. The 6-minute pulses, the longer, slower waves that hinted at deeper work. It felt less like a threat now, more like a background engine. Megan watched its field graph for a moment, then closed the model. She stepped out of her office and walked down the short hall to the outreach room. Inside, a large screen showed a classroom in Nairobi. Students in bright clothes, some in uniforms, some not, sat at desks. A mural of Earth covered the wall behind them, with bright lines drawn between continents. When Megan walked in, their teacher nodded, and the students waved. "Good afternoon, Dr. Lawson," the teacher said. "We're ready, if you are." Megan sat where the camera could see her clearly. "Hi, everyone," she said. "I'm Megan. I study how Earth's crust moves and how the Tartarian network fits into it." A girl in the front row raised her hand at once. "Is it true," she asked, "that the node near our city makes storms turn aside?" Megan smiled. "It seems to bend some weather patterns a little," she said. "Not all storms, and not always, but the fields there do change how air moves." A boy with thick glasses leaned forward. "Can we build our own nodes?" he asked. "Smaller ones, to help where there are floods or quakes?" "Maybe someday," Megan said. "Right now, we're still learning how not to break the ones that are already here." They laughed. Another student asked, "Do you think the builders are still alive, somewhere far or sleeping?" Megan thought of deep pulses, faint codes, strange alignments in old ruins. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe some trace of them still exists. Maybe they've changed so much we would not recognize them if we met. Maybe they left and will never come back." She smiled gently. "But I do know this," she said. "Right now we are the humans who are here. We're the ones who have to decide how to live with what they left. That's a big job." A boy in the second row raised his hand. "Do you ever get scared?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but not like at the beginning. Then I was scared because I felt blind. Now when I'm scared, it's because I can see a little more of the pattern and I know how big it is." She paused. "And I feel less alone in it," she added, looking at all their faces. They spent the next half hour talking. The students asked about gravity, about old ruins, about how to become a tectonic imager or an ancient engineering historian. Harold joined halfway through, telling stories from his digs with gestures that made them laugh. Rhea popped in to show a simple simulation of how a node's field steered earthquakes around it, reducing damage. Long the call ended, Megan sat for a moment in the empty room, letting the quiet settle. "You okay?" Price's voice said behind her. She turned. He leaned in the doorway, older too, hair going silver at the temples, the same sharp look in his eyes. "I'm fine," she said. "You missed the best part." A girl in the back said she wants to map the nodes on Mars. Price chuckled. "Ambitious." She said if Earth has a network, why not other planets? Megan said, "Why stop here?" "You going to tell her Mars probably doesn't have a Tartarian grid?" he asked. "I'm going to tell her to go look," Megan said, carefully. "I'm going to tell her to go look," Megan said, carefully. Price stepped into the room and sat beside her. "Do you ever miss the days when your biggest worry was a misbehaving model?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said. "Then I remember how stubborn I was, how sure I was that my equations could explain everything slow and solid." "You weren't wrong," he said. "You just didn't know there was a second layer." She nodded. "Now I know the slow story of plates and the hidden story of beams are both true. They're just brought it together." "Without using that word from your banned list," Price said with a crooked smile. She laughed. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," he said. That's my job. They sat in silence for a moment. What about you? She asked. Do you still see this as a security problem first? Yes, he said, but a different kind. He looked at the far wall, where a muted news feed showed footage of a family picnic near a safe zone by the Algerian plateau, children flying kites in strangely steady wind. At the start, he said, I thought my job was to keep people away from these things. Now my job is to keep people and nodes from harming each other by accident. He smiled wryly. And to keep some fool from trying to drill into a main shaft to prove a point. Good luck with that, she said. He shrugged. So far, your maps and Harold's lectures have done more to stop that than any order I've given. Megan stood and walked to the window. From here, she could see the far edge of the Wyoming range, dark against the late afternoon sky. A thin snow line clung to its upper ridges. At its base, the camp had grown into a small town of labs, housing, and support buildings, all built at safe distances and angles. Do you ever go inside anymore? Price asked. Sometimes, she said. Not often. I prefer the outside data now. She remembered the first time she had stepped into the black hole, the way the floor had felt like a nerve, the way the platform had tingled under her hand. How about you? She asked. He shook his head. I leave that to braver people. She watched a drone lift off from the town and head toward the range, carrying supplies to an upper ledge station. For a long time, she said slowly, I thought of myself as someone who watched from a distance. Sensors, models, numbers. I didn't touch the crust, I just measured it. Then you walked into a planet-scale machine, Price said. Then I walked into a planet-scale machine, she agreed. She pressed her palm lightly to the glass. I still don't know if that machine cares about us, she said, or even notices us beyond small ripples. But we've proved we can live with it, without waking any teeth. Yet, Price said. Yet, she echoed. We stay careful. Her band buzzed once. Another routine alert. Another minor field shift. Another piece of the network stretching in its sleep. She let it go. The night shift would handle it. Her team knew what to watch for now. Come on, she said to Price. Harold promised to tell that story about the time he almost fell into a sealed shaft in Kazakhstan again. The interns haven't heard it yet. They left the room together. Outside, the world spun. Plates still moved. Mountains still rose and eroded. Rivers still carved their slow paths. Beneath that, the hidden framework still held, beams and halls and nodes adjusting fields in ways no ancient geologist could have imagined. And above it all, small human lights blinked on and off. Cities, ships, drones, learning, adjusting, arguing, cooperating. They were not the first minds to live on this wired planet. They might not be the last, but for this age at least, they were the ones awake. As Megan walked down the hall, voices ahead of her rose in laughter. Harold, exaggerating some detail of a forgotten dig. Rhea, teasing him. Young analysts, shaking their heads and asking questions. She smiled. Tenants, she thought. Heirs, builders of smaller, softer layers on top of a hard old frame. She could live with that. Outside, the buried network pulsed on, steady and deep, carrying through stone a story that would stretch far beyond any single life. And in a glass-walled office above it, someone who had once only measured slow rock kept reading that story, line by patient line.